Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another Books Weekly, my Sunday video in which I discuss books that I've either finished from a previous week or read last week or started last week. And the first book I want to talk to you about is the book that I finished from a previous week, and that is Joan Didion, Blue Nights. This book was published in 2011 and it is a memoir after the death of her daughter Quintana, who died in 2005, only 39 years old after 2 years of illness. This is the second grief memoir Joan Didion wrote. Joan Didion's husband died 2 years before her daughter in 2003, and she wrote A Year of Magical Thinking. Now this one, Blue Nights, is a reflection on Quintana's death, but also a reflection on what it means or meant to Joan Didion to be a parent. Quintana was an adopted child, so this topic of adoption or what the child might have felt because of the adoption, abandonment issues and things like that are a big topic in this one, but also reflections on Joan Didion's very frail health. Like I said, she wrote the memoir in 2011, so sometime after Quintana's death. I talked about this book on my channel before, so I don't want to go into any more details. The only thing I would like to mention is if you're interested in Joan Didion's life and work, and she's a really fascinating writer. She's now in her 80s, I think. There's a documentary that came out this year, The Center Will Not Hold, and it's available on Netflix also. The documentary is done by Joan Didion's nephew. And the other thing I want to mention is if you are, like me, really enjoying reading memoirs, then I would point you to Ashley's channel over at Climb the Stacks, because she reads a lot of memoir, and she has fantastic videos also about grief memoir. So she has topics like, outdoor memoirs or grief memoirs. And she was absent from BookTube for a while, but she came back, thankfully. So if you are interested, and even if you're not interested in memoirs, you should check out her channel, but especially if you are interested in memoirs. The next couple of books I read a lot last week. I was traveling and in the train a lot, and the train were delayed, so I could read a lot. But the next couple of books were all debut novels. If you're following my channel for any length of time, you might remember that one of the reading goals I had for 2017 is read new authors, discover new authors. So I try to read as many debut novels as I can. And the first one I read last week was Liska Jacobs' Catalina. The book was published beginning of November, and I requested it through NetGalley. Now, Liska Jacobs is a Los Angeles native. She worked for newspapers and bookstores, and her debut novel, Catalina, centers around a 30-something woman, Elsa Fischer, who worked for the Museum of Modern Art in New York, had a relationship with her boss, the chief curator there, Eric Reinhardt. Elsa gets fired, gets a very nice severance package, and decides to go back to Los Angeles, where she comes from, meet up with a couple of her friends. They hire a boat, they sail to the island, Catalina, hence the novel's title, and just to burn the severance package and be drunk all the time and take a lot of pills. That's basically the story of the book. Now, I did not like the book very much, I have to say, but on the positive side, the book is almost entirely written, it's from Elsa's perspective, and it's almost entirely written in dialogue, and I thought that was very well done. I always find dialogue difficult to write as a writer, and I admire people who can do it and who have this fast-paced, really engaging way of writing dialogue. So that was really good. But I didn't like the story. Elsa and her friends, especially Charlie, her college friend, and then Jane, the new love interest of a former boyfriend of Elsa's, all the women seem to me very one-dimensionally focused on getting a man or having children. So the whole novel focuses on this topic, and that's just not something I'm interested in. But I mean, if you are interested in a story like that, sort of, Sex in the City, but not as humorous, with a main character who is for 2/3 of the novel either drunk or on pills, you might enjoy it. But I just found the story boring. I'm sorry. The next debut novel I read was Bonfire by Krysten Ritter. Now, you probably all know Krysten Ritter. She is Jessica Jones, and I just love that series. So when I heard that she published a book and the book came out on the 7th of November, I wanted to read it. Bonfire is a very fast-paced crime thriller. You have a main character, Abby Williams, a young woman, a lawyer who works for an environmental agency, law, NGO, and she goes back to Barron in Indiana, her hometown, to investigate the possible water pollution by a big plastic firm called Optimal Plastics. So if you immediately think of Erin Brockovich, yes, something like that. So she goes there with a small team of her colleagues to investigate. But she also, in the course of her investigation of Optimal Plastics, she is actually much more focused on finding out what happened to Casey, a college friend or a childhood friend who then became a frenemy in the course of college or high school. I have to correct myself, high school, and who disappeared. So Casey was, the star girl in the school. Everybody wanted to be like Casey, and all of a sudden she was ill or not, and then she disappeared. She seemed now to live in Florida, but nobody really knows. So most of the book actually is not so much focusing on the Optimal Plastics case and the possible water pollution, but on Abby trying to find out what happened to Casey. She reconnects with some of her old high school frenemies like Misha, now a school teacher and head mistress of the school, and slowly, she finds out what happened. I thought the book was okay. I didn't love it as much as other people did. I thought it was really fast paced, but it's probably, it's my problem. I not only write crime fiction myself, but I read a lot of crime fiction, and I have these red flags when there is a certain coincidental meeting right at the beginning of the book. Then all my red lamps go on. Oh, okay, so this and this and this probably will happen later because of this meeting that is so much a coincidence that it has to be a plot point. So I mean, I read it with pleasure. I thought the main character, Abby Williams, was not very, was a bit one-dimensional, like I said earlier in the Catalina novel. But if you're into a fast-paced kind of Erin Brockovich meets Mean Girl thriller, you should probably check it out. And because I think it's more my pet peeves, things that I didn't like it that much. Simon from Savage Reads really loved the book, and I will leave his much more positive review down in the comment box. So if you are interested, or you think you might be interested, maybe check out his review and then decide. And the third and final debut I read this week was Maja Lunde, The History of Bees. This book was published in Norway in 2015. Maja Lunde is a Norwegian author and translated into English by Diane Oatley. The book was published in Norway in 2015 and came out this year in the US and the UK. This is the UK cover because I like this one better than the American cover. Maja Lunde, like I said, is a Norwegian author, and she has published, I think, about 10 books for children and young adults, and this is her first novel for adult readers. The book follows three main characters set in very different times. We have William, who is a biologist and beekeeper researcher in the 1850s in England, who works on trying to improve beehives, how you structure them, how you build them, and together with his daughter Charlotte and his son Edmund, he tries to improve that and find a new way of doing that and get that patented and become rich. Then we have George in the US in 2007, who is a beekeeper, has a beekeeping farm, had that farm, or that farm was in his family for generations, and he encounters a colony collapse disorder that is something that bees all of a sudden disappear without knowing what happened to the hive. So we follow him struggling with keeping up the farm, struggling also to get his son Tom, who studied English and who is obviously very good at it and gets a scholarship, but his father George wants Tom to work with him on the farm. So we have that storyline. And then finally we have a storyline in the future in 2098 in China, and we have Tao, a young woman who works as a flower pollinator, I think you might say. There are no more bees, so flowers and trees and everything have to be pollinated by hand. So she works, it's a very, very tough work to do that every day for hours and hours, and we follow her after her young son When, a 3-year-old, all of a sudden becomes ill and disappears, is taken by the government and disappears. So you have these three storylines, and they come together very nicely in the end. I'm not going to tell you how, because that would spoil everything. And they all the three storylines center around bees and what happened to them and how you cultivate bees. I really, really enjoyed the book. I thought the stories were really interesting. I had two, minor, no, I don't know whether it's minor, but two things that I didn't like. The first one is also, like with the last book, Bonfire, a very personal thing. I'm as a plot-oriented reader, I always struggle if you continuously switch between storylines. The chapters for each of the three main characters are very short, so you continuously switch between the three. And when I'm interested in a story, take one, the story of Tao, I'm really interested, and then you read 3 pages and then you have to wait for another 10 until the story goes on. And I always struggle with that, but that's a very personal thing. And the other thing is people at Scribner or Simon & Schuster, whoever was responsible for editing, please, at times it was either lazy editing or lazy translating, because there are repetitious adjectives, some sentences, they just don't, connect very well. And if it was the writer's fault, then it's just poor editing, but it might as well be the translator's fault. And it's one of my pet peeves, and I hate it when that happens. But for the rest, I thought the story was really interesting. And the characters was interesting, and it's a very topical issue because bees actually do die, and the colony collapse disorder is something that actually happens. So if you're interested in this kind of semi-science fiction with bees at the center, this might be something you like. And the last book is the book that I haven't started yet, but will start today, and that is by a French author, Virginie Despentes, The Life of Vernon Subutex. Das Leben des Vernon Subutex. This is the German translation, but the book is also available in English. It was published 2 years ago, I think. I will leave the English cover up here somewhere if I can find it. I don't know much about the book. other than that it's a feminist tale about a male subject. I read this for a book club I'm in Cologne, as they call it, a real life book club. So some other member picked this book and I wanted to go in blind. So I'll start it today and report back, obviously. So this was it for this week's Books Weekly. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. As always, I'm looking forward to your comments down below, and I'll see you all soon in my next video. Bye-bye.